We are your home theater and AV questions answered. This is AVRant. Want your home theater or AV question answered by Tom and Rob? Send it to question@avrant.com. Welcome to another edition of AVRant. I'm Tom Andrew and I'm here with
Rob H. This is AVRant. It's your home theater and AV questions answered. Hope everybody had a nice Thanksgiving in the United States there. And feeling a bit weird. It's the second week of being back with video, trying to figure out how all that worked. Get used to that again. But you unfortunately cannot see the lovely big doggo that is behind Tom on the couch. I have a little glimpse of him, there? A little glimpse of him on Skype, but you can't see him.
He
in
won't
our
stay
video.
there for long.
All chopped off.
The other one's on the other edge of the couch. So
okay, got a couple of dogs in behind Tom in case he gets distracted. Now you will know why.
So many reasons why I'm going to get distracted.
Could be. Yeah.
All right. What did you watch?
What did I watch? Really not much at all. I didn't even get through a single entire movie. My theater is not set back up yet. I know people would be like, how is that not the first thing Rob does? But number one thing, make sure my bathroom was in working order. Because if you don't have a bathroom in the place, that trumps everything else. Then getting my bedroom set up, podcasting things set up, kitchen set up. So all those came first. And then I was away out of my apartment again, not for any bad reason, but my sister and her family were away from Friday to Monday on a little ski trip. So I was house sitting and cat sitting. So I haven't even really been in my apartment for a solid week yet. And the home theater has not been set back up. So that means
don't you still need equipment though? You need stuff.
I haven't rebought anything. I haven't been reimbursed by my insurance yet. Still waiting to.
So I mean, can you even set it up? I mean, I guess you have old receivers, but you're not going to go through all the hassle just to have to redo it again, are you?
Well, I mean, there isn't really anything that got damaged that would have been in the main theater.
Oh, I thought you lost your receiver.
That was an older one. That was my Onkyo 818. Not to worry. I have my Denon X6700.
How gauche of me to assume that whatever receiver you had was the one that you were using.
Dude, how could I use one that old? I mean, it doesn't have HDMI 2.1. It doesn't even do Atmos.
I wasn't paying attention to the stupid numbers. I wasn't paying attention to that.
Insulting. How could that possibly be the case? So I will just say I started but have not yet finished The Unbearable Weight of Massive Talent. That is Nicolas Cage.
What is that?
Nicolas Cage playing Nick Cage. It is a fictionalized version of himself.
Oh, I remember when that movie came out. That looked not terrible, which is a thing that you only sometimes say when you see Nick Cage in the movie.
I think I'm about 1/3 of the way through, and so far I have enjoyed it greatly. I mean, he is really hamming it up and having a ball playing a fictional version of himself. And I mean, not at least in the first third of the movie, not a flattering portrayal of Nick Cage whatsoever. And there's also a little bit of extra weirdness. I know you're like, yeah, it's a Nick Cage movie. It's already going to be weird, but even extra weirdness that I didn't realize was part of the movie at all is introduced early on. So enjoying that. Hope it keeps it up for the next 2/3 as I finish it this week.
When I saw the sequel to the Ghost Rider movie, and Nick Cage clearly had way too much discretion in that movie. I was like, am I watching a mental breakdown? And then
given the multiverse, there's every possibility that the Nick Cage version of Ghost Rider comes into the MCU somehow. Why not?
I see a cameo. I do not see him playing a main character. I don't think he's stable enough for the type of character, type of actors that need to be like. I think they all have to be really super like,
committed for the next 12 years.
They have to be able to show up on time and not be nuts. I think.
Well,
because
I mean,
so I see him doing a cameo.
You got people in Black Panther who were questionable on that front. They just don't put them out there for the media press tour. That's how Disney handles that.
So I watched a couple of movies this weekend. I saw Alita, Battle Angel, which for those of you that don't know. First of all, I didn't know that was directed by Robert Rodriguez.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
Wouldn't have made a difference for me because I have, of course, I love Desperado and El Mariachi before that. But, then he kind of went to the whole kids route, which is sort of a thing that directors do when they start having families. Like John Hughes did it for a while. It's like,
I want to make something my family can watch that I've done.
I want my kids to be able to see my stuff, so he starts directing. So that whole and the Spy Kids movies were perfectly serviceable. My kids loved them, and I thought they were okay.
I mean, they got worse and worse, but I don't think he was directing all of them, right? He only did the first one or two,
At
maybe.
some point, yeah. So I mean, there were and I've overall liked him as a director.
Mm-hmm.
So it wouldn't have made a difference in it was. But at the end of the movie, when I saw it, I was like, oh. So the thing that turned me off of this movie before I saw it was the fact that the main character's face is CGI'd. I mean, the whole thing is CGI'd, but
with the gigantic, weird-looking eyes.
Yes, and I thought there's no way I'm going to be able to get invested in this character or believe, or just it's just going to be distracting.
Mm-hmm.
And it wasn't. It was perfectly fine. Like after the first couple of seconds, you're like, she's a cyborg in a cyborg body. You're like, okay, well, that's why she got stupidly large eyes. Okay, right. that makes sense.
And it was motion capture as far as I'm pretty sure I've seen some behind the scenes stuff where they had the rig with the camera that's right in front of the actress's face and pointing right at her, and the dots all marking her face and stuff. So yeah.
So they just kind of distorted all that, and then, but it was the same. You could see the emotions on the face were very realistic and not at all seemed like they were procedurally generated or generated by an artist. So I used to own the VHS of, I think the Battle Angel. I think it's a trilogy. I want to say it's a trilogy of movies. So the first third of the movie, I was like, I recognize all this. This happened in the anime that I used to have.
Right.
So the story, if you've watched anime before, it's big. It's very soap opera-ish. There's lots of big emotions, huge swings, lots of backstabbing, that sort of thing. That's the way anime is. So if you kind of go into it knowing that, the plot moves along super fast because it seems like he's cramming at least two of those. I never saw the other two movies, so he's cramming at least two of those movies, and I might be wrong about the number of movies. Somebody out there is getting super angry right now. Okay, that I didn't look this up beforehand, but I don't pretend to know things I don't know. I just say I don't know them. So he crammed more than one movie's worth of movie into this movie, and there was still, it felt like, more to be done towards the as the movie ended, so there left room for a sequel. But I really liked it. I was surprised how much I liked it. It's a little formulaic at times, but again, it's based on the anime, and the main character, the sort of relationships the main character happens way too fast.
Okay,
just immediately.
But we just got to get to it.
Yeah, so there wasn't a lot of time for that sort of thing, but there was a good enough mix between the characters and the plot as well as the action that I felt like this kind of went, and I watched it with two of my sons and we all really liked it. So that one I was surprised. I'm actually gonna buy it because I saw it on Hulu and I had the volume in here past reference.
Yep.
And it was still not great. It was still really, really, really low. So it is literally the softest streamed thing I have ever seen. I've never streamed anything that was as quiet as this movie is.
Yeah,
so I want to go buy it so I can get the good surround.
Yeah, I seem to recall that people had high praise for its Atmos soundtrack, at least on the Ultra HD Blu-ray version of it. And then I think there was a 3D Blu-ray version of that also got praise. That's just ringing a bell in the back of my mind. Yeah, I think that was the case.
So after the Thanksgiving episode and DJ being absolutely ridiculously fanboyish about Top Gun Maverick, I went out and
I mean, he's not alone. Let's be fair. He's not alone in his fanboyishness for Top Gun Maverick. Lots of people are over the moon about it.
So I saw the original Top Gun in the theaters because I'm old, all right? And I saw it back then, and back then I was like, this is great. This is a fine movie. This is a good movie. I liked it. The love interest storyline part of it was kind of stupid, and I didn't really like that part of it, but the flying was all right. And then the end of the movie is like, oh, and then we're going to war. Blah! And it just sort of happened, right? So I didn't really love the movie as a whole, but it was perfectly serviceable. There were other movies during that time that I liked a whole lot better, but Top Gun, of course, is just it rings all those bells for certain people. There's a patriotic aspect of it. There's the beach and the oiled up people aspect
and I mean,
of
it was
that
big
a lot of
enough
people
that a fair amount of money was spent making parodies of it. So, it was certainly
that is true. It was a huge movie.
Became part of culture.
And back then I was like, I'm sure I was like everybody else because I was young and I was thrilled. I was like, oh, it's great. But back in my mind, I was like, I mean, it was okay. It's okay. And I liked Maverick better than I liked the original Top Gun.
That seems to be what everybody says. Yeah, this one actually had a story.
Movie. Yes. It's a better, there's an antagonist, which they didn't have to name and they didn't name, thankfully. And it's just like technologically more advanced than the United States, which of course, I mean, whatever.
Who could it be?
So, who could it be? Let's all guess. And Jennifer Connelly was in it, and it was also in Alita, which was great because Jennifer Connelly is just phenomenal in everything. So she was amazing in it as she is in everything. But I still left that movie and went, yeah, it was all right. I certainly did not love this movie. Like if I never saw Maverick again, I'd be like, that's fine. We saw the Blu-ray version because we got it from Redbox. We did not get the Ultra HD Blu-ray. So
all right.
the Atmos soundtrack was very good. It kind of spun around and all this stuff.
And I mean, your display doesn't do HDR anyway or 4K, so it shouldn't really be having any sort of negative impact.
But I will tell you
that
it was very, like, at the volume I was listening to, which was under reference, at the volume I was listening to, if you've ever been on a plane and you've heard the engines start to rev up and the plane starts to shake, felt a lot like that in my home theater. So certainly a good soundtrack, like a reference level soundtrack, and I'm sure the video is just as good. But it's like so many callbacks, callbacks. I'm like, so this reminds me of reading, because I never saw the movie, reading Ready Player One, where I got through that book and I went, people only like this book because of the references.
Sure.
And that's what I felt about Maverick. I was like, this is a good movie. This is fine. Perfectly serviceable, popcorn action flick sort of thing, but does not deserve to have gotten $1 billion or whatever it did. The only reason it got that was because of the nostalgia factor. And
but see, they were smart because people went in there and they got what they expected, which was basically Top Gun again, but they added a bit more and made it a little bit surprising. Nothing that's gonna make you like spin your head around and go, I can't see where that came from, but like added a little bit more to the story, and therefore everyone's like, it's the greatest thing ever because it's what I already knew. It's already comforting. I'm not like being bewildered by having to think too hard about this, and then it's still a little bit new. So we're not gonna say it's exactly the same thing. It's not shot for shot remake, and there you go. It's the perfect balance. Billions of dollars.
And I once again, just like the first one, I'm like, it was fine. It was fine.
All right.
So all you people who loved it, I'm glad that you loved it. I'm glad that.
Having some.
I think that with
food.
some retrospect, with some distance, and you look back on it after seeing it a couple times, you're gonna go, I mean. Really, Tom Cruise is still the best pilot that exists on the planet Earth, right? There's that makes it like his reflexes have not gone down. He's so much better than these young kids that he can not only do it in the time, but do it faster than the time that they have set because he's that good, right?
He's that good.
Yeah, keep telling yourself that, Gen X. By the way, I am Gen X. Yes. Keep telling yourself that, Gen X, that you're just as good as you were when you're 19. Because let me assure you, that is not the case.
Call of Duty Online would beg to differ, but nonetheless, yes, you can feel good about it. All right, well, yes, some comfort food around Thanksgiving. Nothing wrong with that. Looks good, sounds good. I say thumbs up.
All right, I'd give it a whatever. So. This is AVRant, the podcast that answers your home theater and AV questions and also angers you about the movie that you love the best. DJ,
we have been getting a little bit more ranty lately, which is fine because it's in our name.
But DJ can send all his hate mail directly to me. You know where I am, DJ. And I will immediately delete it without reading. So just delete it before you send it and save us both some trouble. We answer your home theater and AV questions. Get your question answered. All you have to do is ask by emailing us at question@avrant.com. You can go to the website, AVRant, and find our show notes as well as our Flickr albums, which will have all the images that we talk about in the podcast. Facebook.com/AVRant podcast, YouTube.com/AVRant, where you can see our lovely faces and also those same images, but like as we're talking about them. So
that's right.
and you could theoretically see a dog if Rob wasn't so horrible and cut him off.
That's right. So, it's all my fault.
Poor Felix is back there being ignored. You can contact us directly, rob@avrant.com. What else?
Yeah. Well, I'm still on Twitter at First Reflect, and I'm also on Hive at First Reflect, and I've kind of given up on Mastodon. It isn't very much fun. But those two, I'm still on Twitter, and I'm on Hive. Come join me on Hive. We need more people over there.
I joined Hive, but I didn't. I think I joined it 3 times trying to get the...
You did.
I kept screwing it up. I was like, wait a second.
I followed all 3 instances of you, so no matter how you log in.
This is not the name I wanted. This is not the ego. I wanted the at something, and then I got the wrong at something because I got it. I don't know. I was a little confused.
I should probably unfollow the one that you don't want so that people don't come to my profile and then look at who I'm following.
It won't make a difference. I'm not posting. So,
yeah, I know.
Go ahead. Let them post.
You're posting there as much as you did on Twitter.
That's right. And you can find me at tom@avrant.com and forget all the rest of that crap.
That's right.
I want to thank our listeners of the week. To become a listener of the week, you can have to support us in some way. One of the ways you can do that is going to avrant.com and clicking on the Buy Us a Cup of Coffee link on the right side of the page there. And it's a little cup of coffee. Can't miss it.
Mm-hmm.
That'll send you to a PayPal donation site. So we want to thank Gurinder and Steve for doing that. Thank you, Gurinder. Thank you for Steve.
Yeah, that's very nice. Thank you, Gurinder. Thank you, Steve, for the PayPal donations. We very much appreciate your financial support.
We also want to thank our 139 patrons over at patreon.com. Patreon's a service that you sign up to become a monthly supporter of our podcast. So every month I'll take some money from you, a minimum of $1, and give the rest of it to us. Most of it, at least.
Yeah.
So that we want to thank our 139 patrons.
Yeah, that's patreon.com/AVRant podcast if you'd like to sign up to make an automatic monthly donation. So big thanks to our 139 patrons over there.
All right, Greg, if you can't support us financially, do something and let us know what it is, or if we figure out what it is on our own, we will mention you here. So Greg says he might be able to hook Rob up with a Harmony Ultimate Plus hub for his parents. That would be great.
That would be nice. Yeah, what's happened is over at my parents' place, I have them set up with a Harmony 650. That is an infrared-only Harmony remote. So they've upgraded their cable box, which now has a RF remote that doesn't work with IR.
Lovely.
And, of course, their Amazon Fire TV never worked with infrared. So it was fine when it was like, okay, we had the Harmony and we had the Amazon remote, because that's like, okay, anything to do with just watching TV, they'll use the Harmony. Anything to do with watching streaming services, they'll use the Amazon Fire TV. And you had those 2 remotes. But now it's like back to 3 remotes, and that's almost as bad as it ever was. So I'm like, okay, if I could have a hub-based system, that'd be great. I was perfectly willing to give them my Harmony Elite that I have and transition myself over. But I'm like, Greg came along. He's like, I honestly just don't use my Harmony anymore. He said via email. So he's like, if you had use for it, I wouldn't mind sending it to you as like, donation to the podcast or whatever. I'm like, you know what? That actually would work out really nicely. Yeah. So that would be great. Hopefully I'm in contact with Greg via email, and hopefully we'll work out all the shipping details and all that, because it's going across the border.
Very generous.
But that's
these
super
Harmony
duper
remotes
nice.
those Harmony remotes are worth the weight in gold.
Yeah, no kidding.
So
thank you,
very
Greg.
much for that. We also got some notes of gratitude for keeping the podcast going through the ongoing meltdown of Twitter and everything else that's going on in the universe. From Greg, Gurinder, Kris. Greg from the Gold Coast of Australia. Been there? It was cold. It was winter.
Yes.
That was a little cold, but I was there. Jack, who's a member of our 2 Hour Plus Club. Aras. BJ, who gets a kick out of Rob's Canadian rants that always start with the phrase, "I'm not completely on board with," because that's how Canadians get angry.
That's right. Got to hedge my bets, not infuriate too many people. But yeah, thank you very much to Greg, Gurinder, Kris, Greg S. over in Australia, Jack, Aras, and BJ. Thank you all very much for sending in those notes of gratitude to us. We do appreciate all the encouragement we can get. So yeah, very nice of you. Big thank you to everybody who continues to listen and send in your questions.
So we've got some news here. This comes from Infinite Gary. I guess we can be approaching the end of discs by mail from Netflix. While nothing is yet official, Netflix's CEO, Reed Hastings. Dude, is that guy still CEO?
He's still CEO.
I'm glad he took our advice so long ago and shut the heck up. Because for a while there, he kept talking and putting his foot in his mouth. So it was good that he finally stopped talking. Said during a previous media event that sending physical discs by mail will likely come to an end in 2023. If you're still a subscriber, you have likely noticed the trademark red envelopes have actually been labeled as coming from DVD.com, a Netflix company, for some time now. DVD.com has a separate office about 20 miles away from Netflix's main headquarters and has been and it has seen subscriber numbers dwindle from a high of about 16 million to the current 1.5 million. Meanwhile, Netflix streaming has grown to over 223 million subscribers worldwide.
So, truly the end of an era. There will be people upset if they completely shut down the discs by mail. Infinite Gary wrote in about it because he said, as much as there is available on streaming,
you still can't get everything.
Still can't get everything. He's like, I still have, I think it was like almost 200 titles that are still on his disc queue, to eventually maybe get to him one day. So he's crossing his fingers that there will be a massive disc sell-off, which I don't know if they would bother to do that directly or if they're just going to hand over everything they got to some liquidation company somewhere. I don't know how they're intending to do that because they have, I don't know how many discs. I don't know if it's millions. It's certainly hundreds of thousands if it isn't millions of discs that they have. Apparently, according to one report, over the course of Netflix's discs by mail lifetime, they've done well over 5 billion mail outs of discs, and that really was just in the United States. Netflix was never doing discs by mail to any other countries. So the 223 million subscribers that they have for the streaming service, that is worldwide. That's global, of course. That has nothing to do with physical mail. So they were always going to be limited in the physical mail numbers. But yeah, going from 16 million subscribers at one point down to now 1.5 million, that's still 1.5 million people who are getting discs by mail. But nevertheless, clearly the numbers are not going to go back up at this point. So it all makes sense.
This has kind of been in the back of my mind for a while now. And just in relation to this sort of thing, right? So if you have a business, whatever it might be, it seems that if you're not growing, you're failing.
Right.
That seems to be the general
certainly
consensus.
Any publicly traded company that has stocks that investors buy on the stock market, that is always the way it goes.
But like Harmony, for example, who kind of had the whole market, and then they're like, "Well, we're not growing." Well, like, you got everybody. What else do you want? You got them all. It's okay to just be successful. If you're Netflix,
if you're not a publicly traded company with investors who want to see the stock go up, then you can just keep going.
So it's sort of it's sort of a shame that we seem to be too focused on this sort of growth model and not focused enough on just getting a profitable business that continues to make money, and then just be okay with that. Just
on the other hand, though, if something is just standing pat and you're a privately held company and maybe that's all fine and you can predict what your revenue and your profits are likely to be for the next 5 to 10 years, but if things are going down, then even if you're a smaller privately held company, if stuff is going down, that is not a great sign. And when it comes to sending out discs in the mail to subscribers, that's going down. The numbers are going down. It doesn't matter who's doing it, whether you're publicly traded or not. So I can see any company being like, you know what? This just isn't the direction the market is going when it comes to consuming video at home. And I don't know anybody would argue against that.
No, I don't think so either. Yeah. Like I said, this was just kind of bringing up this thought that I've been kind of mulling around in the back of my mind. And when Netflix was the alternative to Blockbuster in your local, like Hollywood Video and stuff, where it was getting to the point where it was like a newer movie was like $5 a night, to rent, which was.
And then you had the late fees. The late fees was a huge thing. That was a huge part of Netflix's early
if you didn't get it back by
marketing.
like 10 a.m. the next morning, or noon or something, you get a late fee. I'm like, I haven't had it for I barely had it for 12 hours, and you're going to be giving me a late. Anyways.
And there were the cases where the late fee was more than literally just renting it for another day. Like there was crazy stuff like that went on. So,
All right, shall we reminisce a bit about some Black Friday deals? I guess we shall, because it's written here and I now have to read it.
I was just excited by some of these. So, I mean, too late now, hearing these now. This was, Black Friday through Cyber Monday, but I was just a little bit surprised the size of the discounts on some of the products that I personally keep an eye on. Now, this is not stuff that everybody would have been looking at, but because I'm looking at big TVs, so 83 inches and larger. But there was some amazing stuff out there if you happen to snag one up. Tom didn't, even though I texted him about it. Just didn't happen.
I know. TCL's 98-inch R754 QLED TV got down to $5,000 from his regular $8,500.
So that was that 98-inch mini LED, 192, I think, zones of local dimming going on there. But yes, 98 inches, even bigger than Tom's projection screen. So that was the one where way back when Tom mentioned to his wife, he's like, yeah, my TV could cost somewhere between, I don't know, $3,000 to $8,000. Because at the time, TCL was like, yeah, our 98-inch LCD is going to be $8,000. It's priced at $8,500 these days. But yeah, I got that to $5,000 for Black Friday through Cyber Monday. And that's pretty remarkable when you think you could get a 98-inch flat panel. I don't know if it would, fit up your flight of stairs and get around any corners, because that's a big honking screen and it does not bend. But yeah, $5,000 for a 98-inch, pretty remarkable, because we were looking at $20,000 plus for that type of screen size in the past.
LG's 83-inch C1 and C2 OLEDs were $1,000 off at $3,000 and $4,000 respectively. The G2 got down to $4,800 from $6,500. So that's pretty good.
Yeah. So I remember we had a listener who was saying that their maximum budget was $3,500 and wanted an 85-inch screen, wanted to get an OLED, but they were priced $4,000 or more. We found some deals at the time we were recording that. I think it was $3,650 or something like that for a C1. Well, I hope he was looking around and was like, hey, Best Buy's selling 83-inch C1 OLEDs from 2021, $3,000. That was brand new, $3,000. That's pretty amazing. I hope anybody was waiting on an 83-inch OLED was able to take advantage of that.
Samsung's 85-inch QN90B got down to $2,900 from $3,500.
Yeah, so under $3,000 for an 85-inch, essentially flagship in terms of the 4K models that Samsung sells, because of course Samsung considers their 8K TVs to be their flagships now, or their QD-OLEDs, and if it's 55-inch or 65-inch only. But the 85-inch QN90B, that's the flagship in the 4K QLED series, under $3,000 for 85 inches. Pretty sweet.
And VCO's M512A-H6 soundbar was $350 from $500.
Yes. Now, why would I be mentioning a $500 soundbar? It's because this is the only soundbar I feel good about recommending. It's the only one I would personally not regret buying, because I just feel that all the other soundbars that are like less than $1,000 are kind of crappy. I don't really think they're worth the price, whereas this one, the Vizio M512A-H6, so memorable. But, that one sounds pretty darn good. $500 I don't think is asking too much crazy money for a soundbar, but down at $350, I'm like, you kind of want to hop on that when that sale was going on. You can very frequently find them going for $400. And then I'm like, if you're getting up to $1,000 to $1,500 for a soundbar, I kind of just want to get proper speakers at that point. This is like the only soundbar I really like, and I tweeted and hived. I don't know what the thing we're using, buzzed, whatever about it on those social media platforms. I hope some people snapped one up. I know some people responded to that, so maybe they did, and I hope you enjoy.
Okay.
Did you get any Black Friday deals for yourself?
No.
Okay.
No. I didn't do any of that. Oh, it's not true. We got Busch Gardens tickets.
Okay.
Which were on sale.
They were on sale.
They're still crazy expensive. It's ridiculous. Going to, I don't understand how anybody goes to Disney anymore. We looked up tickets to Disney. We have friends who have family that have either retired from or currently work for Disney, so they can get people in. And I haven't paid to go to Disney in decades. And if I had to pay, I wouldn't go. And it's just, it's crazy how much money it costs to go there.
And Bob Chapek got rid of the quick thing, whatever it was, the quick pass ticket thing, so that like you get the regular tickets, but then you could get like 2 or 3 quick pass things if you went in right away and sort of have your time reserved to get in the quick pass line.
Yeah.
He got rid of all of that. So now that Bob Iger's back, maybe he'll put it back. Could be.
I need more water or something, so I'm gonna have to go get something because I didn't bring enough. Some comments here. Greg previously asked about a solution that would let him connect his headphone amplifier to his TV optical audio output. We said he just needed an inexpensive digital to analog converter, so he picked up one from Amazon for $6, and it worked. But that still required at least one log cable, so he set about trying to figure out wireless solutions. Turned out he already had a Sonos Connect on hand that he had forgotten about. Okay. It's like you and Rob. Like, I didn't know I had this until it got water damaged.
That is definitely true in my case. Digging through all these crates of stuff that I have, I'm like, oh yeah, I did have that.
Yeah. I have that too. I can give you a hard time about it, but the reality is that happens to me literally all the time.
Live anywhere long enough, almost anybody can relate to that happening.
So, and since he already uses a Sonos Beam with this TV, he was able to connect it. Now his Sonos Connect feeds his headphone amp right next to his seat. No more annoying his wife late at night. That's what
there you go.
For. She's just going to find another reason to be annoyed with you if my wife is anything.
But it won't be this. So there you go. Nice solution. And at least we put him on the right track. And I don't know if he's going to be returning the $6 DAC to Amazon, if that's even worth the trouble.
For $6, dude. I wouldn't even go to the UPS store. I'd just be like, nope. I guess I'm going to live with this thing now.
He certainly isn't out a pile of money on that solution. He was looking up headphone, DAC, amp combo things, integrated units. He's like, everything here costs like, $180 plus, and I just don't want to spend that much. So we definitely saved him some money on that front. And he rediscovered his Sonos Connect. So congratulations.
There you go. How very exciting for you. Mm-hmm. Some questions here. Dan has a pair of Velodyne DD10 Plus subwoofers. Does Velodyne even make subwoofers anymore?
I don't know. I really have not been keeping up with them. I haven't seen them around.
I'm gonna have to Google them after I read all this, anyways, because I have not seen a Velodyne sub in like
it hasn't.
Forever.
I remember when they were like the only dedicated subwoofer company, where like that was what they did was subwoofers. Yeah. Like back
and then they started making headphones. So.
Back before the Internet Direct days, yeah.
Yes, and anyways, Dan says they've been fantastic, but one of them has stopped outputting sound. It still powers on, and it still responds to the remote commands and wakes up when there's a line level signal, but no sound comes out. It's like the preamp section got disconnected from the actual amplifier or something, or the amplifier got disconnected from the driver, which can also happen.
Or something just died in the amplifier, which it could be a fairly simple component, but it's kind of hard to figure out yourself unless you're into electronics, actually following along circuit boards and
have all the testing equipment.
That's right, yeah.
Yeah. Seems like even though it might cost several $100s, it would be worth getting it fixed, ? But then what should he do? He's worried the second sub might develop the same problem. Should he sell them, keep using them, and just wait for the second one to break too? If he were to sell them, what should he replace them with? Attempting to keep a similar size of about a 20-inch cube. So this is... this is a bit of a logical fallacy here. If one of my subwoofers broke, then my other one's probably going to break too. It's like there's no indication, there's no reason to think that because one broke, the other one's going to break. Mm-hmm. We have no idea what's going on there. Some capacitor could have gone bad. I had my AC went out one time because a lizard crawled in there into like the low control board and fried itself and shorted everything out. And you removed the lizard, cleaned everything up, and replace. I think you might have to replace the board. And it was no big deal. I mean, does that mean that there's going to be another lizard that's going to crawl into it if I had 2 AC units? No, of course. It's Florida. Yes, it's exactly what's going to happen. But in your case, I would not assume that because one broke that the other one is going to. So. You're assuming that it's going to cost several $100s. We don't know that it's going to cost several $100s. We know it's probably going to cost $100 just to get somebody to look at it.
Exactly. Like there will be a cost to it for sure.
Yeah.
But I would anticipate you probably are looking more in the hundreds of dollars versus the thousands of dollars as far as repair goes. Now, if it's one of these cases where the place you go to, all they do is like try to replace the entire amplifier or something like that. That might be tricky because I don't know if replacement parts for the DD10 Plus are still readily available.
Right.
I'm not sure how easy it would be to get in like a drop-in replacement, but if it's something like a capacitor has, just reached the end of its life and now you just need a replacement capacitor and the thing's going to come back, that wouldn't be all that expensive at all. But you do need somebody who's going to be able to, test it properly and trace it.
So it's a thing to remember, and this is true of almost any repair you go into. The repair might be easy and cheap, but the time it takes to figure out that it's easy, cheap, and repair costs a lot of money. Yeah. So I would go, first of all, I would call more than one place in town that works on electronics. Say, hey, do you work on? I've got the subwoofer. This is what's happening. What would you suggest that I do? And then just hear them out, and then call somebody else, hear them out, and keep doing that until you hear enough that you're like, okay, these people all sound about the same, and there's one person that's way out of line. So that either that one person really knows what they're talking about, or that one person is a hack and that has no idea.
Sure,
you have to decide that. But if everybody's completely different, then you're kind of in a weird spot. I mean, Velodyne. I haven't Googled them yet. I would assume they're still in business in some way. Somebody over there should be able to answer a question. But, amplifiers, drivers, and the preamp section that's in there, none of these things are like super complicated electronics that people who know such things couldn't get into and diagnose. But a lot of them are going to tell you, I would guess. I could try, but it might end up being more expensive for me to fix it than it would be to replace it.
Right.
Okay. So the replacement cost here is what you really need to know, because you need to go in saying, hey, it's going to cost me like fill in the blank,
Sure.
$1,000, $2,000, for a whole new subwoofer. Because I can tell you right now, just replacing that plate amp on the back of it, if you could get a drop-in replacement, which I don't think you can, but if you could, there's no guarantee that's gonna fix it.
Yeah. So, I mean, Velodyne Acoustics, I'm looking them up as we're recording this. They are still online. They still have the Digital Drive Plus series. The DD10 Plus is still listed on their website. So, I mean, if this is a matter of, that same model, there might have been a running order change or something like that. But, the same model is still listed there. My instinct is that repairing this thing is not going to be tremendously difficult. And I don't think it's going to be as expensive as buying whole new subwoofers. In fact, I would go ahead and get in touch with Velodyne Acoustics directly, because they might have authorized repair centers that they want to send you to, or they might be able to help you out directly. I don't know exactly, but it's certainly worth reaching out with an email. Why the heck not? So yeah, that I think that's my honest answer for what I think you should do. Because I agree with Tom, this isn't necessarily going to be, I mean, the thing is, if you're able to get some information back, if you do actually go to a repair place and they're able to diagnose, like, yeah, it's the capacitor. I mean, this is like, keep saying capacitor because that's the most likely electronic component in anything that would actually in some way burn itself out. If anything is going to do it, it's almost certainly a capacitor. And if it's just a matter of, okay, those are reaching the end of their life, they are a thing that does wear over time. It's a bit like a battery, right? You can only recharge and discharge a battery so many times before it reaches the end of its life. It isn't useful anymore. That happens with capacitors as well. So it might be a case of, okay, yeah, that is where, if that's what we've been able to diagnose, then having my second one recapped, as they often call it, the capacitors replaced, maybe that's worth doing. Right. And maybe that's, several $100s altogether, but that's still way less than buying two entirely brand new subwoofers. So that's what we genuinely think you should do first. That is the most cost-effective way to come at this, and I think has a high likelihood of success. But let's just take the other side of it. Let's just say he wants an excuse to buy two new subwoofers, and they just happen to need to be about, 20-inch cubes, which is sizable, all right? Now, we don't know what your budget is for your two new subwoofers. I will simply say that if you're looking at something that's about a 20-inch cube, then we probably are looking at sealed subwoofer models from most of the big internet direct companies that we talk about all the time. SVS, of course, comes to mind first. They have some fantastic sealed subwoofers. You could literally fit physically, in the size that you've dictated, any of their sealed subwoofer models. Even their largest SB16 Ultra is about a 20-inch cube. So, that model is going for $2,300 each. There's a $100 discount if you buy two of them together as duals, but that's an expensive subwoofer. If you're looking for a model that has similar output and extension capabilities as your Velodyne DD10 Plus, I probably wouldn't go much lower than the SB3000, because the DD10 Plus is a ported model. So even though it's a 10-inch driver, with that port, it has lower extension and higher output at 20 hertz than, say, an SB2000 Pro. So an SB3000 is probably about as small in SVS's lineup as I would point you. And though it's going for either $1,100 or $1,200 each, depending on the finish option. The gloss black is $100 more at $1,200 each. Again, $100 discount if you're buying two of them together. And then there's the SB4000 that slots right between the SB3000 and the SB16 Ultra. SB4000 coming in at $1,800 or $1,900 if you're getting the gloss black finish. So that's the sort of price range you're looking at if you go with any of the sealed models from SVS. There are less expensive options. If we go over to Shoe Research, HSU, their ULS15 Mark II, that is their sealed subwoofer with a 15-inch driver in it, but it does fit within this 20-inch cube sort of size that you mentioned. Those go for $1,085. That's with the shipping added in there if you just look at the price they're charging, but then they do charge shipping separately. So $1,085, that's less expensive than anything from SVS. Even the SB3000 was $1,100. It's very close to the same price, but that's what you're looking at there. Then if you were like, okay, I can pay a little bit more than $1,100, but I don't want to pay as, getting close to $2,000. Power Sound Audio has options for you too. I would point you at their sealed, their S1512, and depending on the finish that you choose there, it's between $1,450 to $1,700. It's right in that middle price range, again, for a 15-inch sealed subwoofer, and that'd be from Power Sound Audio. So I think those are your great options if you're just taking this as an excuse to get something new. And that'd be our recommendations, I think, unless Tom has something completely different.
I do have something completely different, actually. Because
what have we got?
I went on the Velodyne website, and they have if you click on anything, like I looked on the DD Plus, whatever one, it says, find a distributor, right? Okay. So I clicked on it, and it said, okay, North America, Europe, Australia, whatever. When you click on North America, it actually gives you a map of distributors, and it gives you a map of service centers.
There you go.
So there's service centers, and there's not a lot of them. I mean, there's like 10, maybe 12. I'm not counting these dots fast enough. But so definitely go there and check out to see if there's a service center like reasonably near you. Yeah. Or even if it's not reasonably near you, call them. Yeah. And, like all of them or some subset of them until you feel like you've gotten all the advice you think you need to figure out what they say they would do. Sure. And then when you call your local place, you're like what you should never do is call, let's going to your doctor and saying, I think I have cancer. You go to your doctor, you tell them your symptoms, and then they tell you what you have, and then you go home and WebMD it and decide you've got something else. That's between you and how the gods you serve there. But you never go up to this is what's wrong with my subwoofer. Can you fix it? And whoever it is going to say, well, if that's what's wrong with your subwoofer, I can fix it. Mm-hmm. But I don't know that that's what's wrong with your subwoofer, and I don't think that you know what's wrong with your subwoofer either. None of us know until I get in there and figure it out. So just call them with the symptoms, just like you're going to do with the service centers, and see what they say. Okie doke. Let me close some of this and go back to that. Okay. What's a good SPL meter these days? He hasn't shopped for one since the Radio Shack days. So there's a couple out there. I have an app. I have an article on AV Gadgets called "Using an SPL App in Your Home Theater," which basically says, why you shouldn't, or how you can, or what you can use it for, and also links to other articles on AV Gadgets. So from there, you can find the other articles about shopping for them and everything else. But this, if you're inclined to use the SPL app on your phone, you just have to be really super careful about how much stock you put in those things, because
you almost need to calibrate the app on your phone with another SPL meter. From that point on, it's pretty darn reliable. But
it's fine, but
the initial calibration to your phone's built-in microphone, that's the issue where sometimes things get a little bit hinky. So yeah, if you need to run and grab water
while Rob takes you through all this. I'll be right back.
Yeah, we've got sort of our regular usual suspects here. If you want the absolute pinnacle of accuracy, then I'm going to send you over to Cross Spectrum Labs, our good friends there. We always send people there to get their U-Mic 1 measurement microphones because they calibrate each and every one of them individually. They offer a similar thing for an SPL meter. It's based on the Galaxy CM140, and the price that Cross Spectrum charges is $135, which honestly, if you just go searching for the Galaxy CM140 SPL meter, it's often more expensive than that. So Cross Spectrum is sort of buying them in bulk and able to give you ones that have already been individually pre-calibrated for you. So if you want the absolute pinnacle of accuracy, you cannot do better than that CM140 from Cross Spectrum Labs. But if you're saying $135 is considerably more than I wanted to pay for an SPL meter, we certainly have less expensive options than that. If you want about the cheapest one that we would point you to, then that's going to be from a company called or not from a company. It's Triplet. Is that the company? I don't know. It's the Sonocheck Mini anyway. That's the TSC-MC1 if you're looking for the model number. It goes for $45 over at Parts Express. So that has the C weighting, the slow response. That's what we're generally looking for.
Yeah.
A lot of the super cheap digital ones don't have C weighting on them, so that's why we like this particular one, the Sonocheck, for $45. And then if you want something that falls in between, and honestly, this is the one that I would usually point most people to. It's from a company, BAFX, going for $58. It has a crazy model name. It's going to be a lot easier if you just sort of follow along with the link that we're going to have for it. But if you just search a BAFX SPL meter, you'll find them going for $58 over at Amazon. And that's the one I would honestly point most people to. So there you go.
All right. There are some YouTube videos on the new Denon receivers in the Marantz Cinema series. They're saying the Marantz sounds better than the Denons. He doesn't really buy it, but it's so common. Tough to believe there's really no truth to it at all. How do we account for it? Lies. Lies and self-deception.
Pure expectation bias. Yeah.
So I've on every website I've ever worked on, I've always written some sort of article about the psychology of home theater, and I've got one on AV Gadgets. I'll link it up after I finish talking about it here. But the reality is our brains are so very good at tricking ourselves, and that's sometimes good and sometimes bad. We fill in the gaps. Our brain fills in the gaps of between expectations and or even what we see and what we haven't yet seen. So I don't know if you remember, and this used to happen to me all the time when I was in school, elementary, middle, high school. They would have the clocks on the wall that would tick, 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 right? And if you turned and you looked at the clock, the first tick was always longer than every other tick that came after it. And there is this is your brain filling in what you haven't seen yet. So before you even focus, as you focus, your brain goes, oh, that clock, that there's a clock there, blah blah blah, and it like you have a picture in your brain of what it is, but it hasn't moved in your brain because you're not actually seeing it yet. And there's a whole, you can Google this. I don't remember what it's called, but it's called something about the clock phenomenon or something like that. That's how much our brain affects what we experience going on around us. Like, we can be fooled by so many things, and there's so many ways that you can have examples for yourself. Watch a fight scene with the sound muted, and suddenly nobody's actually hitting each other. With the sound on, they're clearly hitting each other. You could see it. You could see it as clear as day. Turn the sound off, like, oh my God, that wasn't even close. Like, it wasn't even, like, that person couldn't even feel the wind off of that. So, when you see these things, I'm going to give them the benefit of the doubt and say that they really believe it, and it's because of their expectations going into the review or whatever. On the other side, it is just complete. I have to be able to say something. So I'd rather lie than say these things are basically the same. Just whatever one's the best for you is the one. That's why this podcast is the way it is. Okay, that's why we are the way we are, because you're not going to come in here and say, "Oh, well, all Klipsch speakers sound." No, shut up. That's you just stop. Just stop what you're saying, because it is not true. Whatever is coming after that cannot possibly be true, because not everything is anything. So with Marantz and Denon, historically, before they were owned by the same company, Marantz was considered the higher end of the two. And even now, Marantz, if you talk to them, they'll tell you, "Oh, we make tweaks to the internals and use the best wire or the whatever crap." It sounds the same. It sounds the same.
Yeah, I honestly think one of the smartest things that the new owners of Sound United ever did was increase the price of the Marantz products. I think that was a really smart marketing decision, because they were getting really close to each other, Denon and Marantz, for very good reason, because the internals were not very different at all. But now they're like, no, you know what? We're just going to bump up the price of all of the Marantz sister models by a significant margin. And like clockwork, now the YouTube reviewers are coming out going, yeah, well, clearly this one that costs $700 more, even though it's the exact same feature set, this one that costs $700 more clearly sounds better. I think that was one of the smartest marketing things that they've ever done. And I don't have a problem with it, because Denon still exists. It's not like everything just got that much more expensive. You can absolutely just go get the Denon version of it and save those $700. The measurements do not bear out any of this claim that they sound any different whatsoever. If there are any measurable differences, they are minuscule. And the measurements just don't bear it out.
You get these people who get like, oh, well, the Denons measure worse on this, and the Marantz, have better this. And I'm like, none of it's audible. Yeah. Like, none of it. None of it is audible.
When sometimes the measurements show that the Denon was the one that was a tiny bit better. Not significantly so. Not anything I would say, this is the reason you should get I will say you should get the Denon sister model because it's $700 cheaper. Yes. That's the reason I would say to it. But sometimes the measurements say that the Denon was actually slightly superior in a like-for-like measurement of whatever parameter you happen to be measuring. So, put that out of your mind. But I do think it was a smart marketing decision, because it's very effective.
It's very effective. If it's more expensive, it's got to be better. I mean, wine is a perfect example of this. I remember the first time I really did a wine tasting myself, where I went out and I bought different quality wines based on price. Yeah. Like, here's a $10 bottle, a $20 bottle, a $30 bottle, a $50 bottle, and we all tasted it. And like the $20 bottle clearly won. Like, everybody agreed.
But if the more expensive one weren't better, how could they get away with charging that much?
And
that's a very poor argument, very bad logic, but there you go. It's quite effective for people.
Lastly, he says Polk's reserver.
Oh, it should just be reserve. I don't know why that extra R came.
I know that extra R in there. Polk's Reserve series speakers are getting high praise. Reviews are that the most neutral, flat response tilt like this speakers that Polk has ever offered at their price point. Do we have a take on them? I haven't heard them. But
I have not heard these new ones for myself yet. So no, we don't have subjective opinions to offer. I will say, from the measurements, the measurements look more like a flat line than most of the Polk sort of entry to mid-level price point speakers have in the past. So that's great. I mean, Polk, part of Sound United now, part of that same new ownership. They have done some redesigns. Now, what I will say is, Polk seems to have said, you know what our trademark thing is going to be for the moment? Ring radiator tweeters, because they started that with their new Legend series, and now the ring radiator tweeters have trickled all the way down to the Reserve series, which is not quite entry level for Polk, but one step above that, their midline series. So ring radiator tweeters do have a characteristic to them, which is that they are quite highly directional. There's really no way around it. It's a physics part of how a ring radiator tweeter works. How it generates its sound is by its nature more directional. And that bears out in the measurements that people are taking of these speakers as well. So one of the things that tends to happen with more highly directional speakers is that when you are sitting on access to them, you tend to get a very sort of forward, vivid type of sound. It does tend to make those high frequency details stand out quite strongly to your ears, and then you aren't getting as much of those sidewall reflections because it just isn't sending as much sound out to the sides as a wide dispersion speaker would be. So there does tend to be a bit of a characteristic sound to any speaker that's using a ring radiator tweeter like that. Sometimes that's very pleasurable. Sometimes, if you're the person sitting well off axis, it isn't so great. So, that's my take just on the technical side of things, but I have no reason based on the measurements that are out there of those speakers to say that I don't think that would be a neutral sounding speaker as long as you're basically sitting on axis to them. That's sort of the caveat that's going on there. But if you are, they certainly appear to be measuring very nice and linear and neutral and accurate.
There's so many good speakers out there these days.
There really are.
I talked about that.
But these are getting some new hype, Tom. Some new hype.
Oh, Polk finally made a not crappy speaker.
That's right.
Let's all get excited about it. I got a better idea. How about we go buy the speakers that we already know aren't crappy? Then we don't have to buy Polks.
I kind of like the Signature series, the little guys. I like them.
Julian had a flood in his new bedroom. It was just the one room, thankfully, but did we know that dealing with water damage sucks?
Yeah.
Never hurt. No, it's actually, just throw some towels down. How hard can it be?
Sure. Never could have guessed.
No. He just figured we could commiserate together.
Yeah. I'm very sorry to hear that, Julian.
Listen, you're triggering Rob right now. I'm sorry. We have to change the subject. We need a trigger warning on this.
I am glad it was somewhat limited, but he's got some photos here where they were, disassembling that bedroom, and does not look like a super fun time.
Sorry. I didn't do that. So a single nail went through a baseboard into a hot water pipe that was in a location where it shouldn't have been. That was back in August, and it took until October for the nail to rust enough for it to start leaking. They noticed when water started oozing up from between the floorboards. The whole vinyl floor and all the baseboards, along with the drywall installation near the floor, all had to be demolished. Mold and mildew mitigation took a whole week, which is actually
not too bad.
Not too bad.
Yeah.
What an ordeal, he says. But in happier news, he started making his DIY absorption panels. He went with Rockwell insulation. He had lots of 1x4 cedar left over from a siding project, so we made frames out of that. Doesn't cedar smell good or something? It smells like something, right?
And it's quite weather resistant. It's probably the best wood to use for like a deck, something like that. So yeah.
So if you get water in here again, you just have to replace the insulation. He says the Rockwell fits snugly and doesn't look like it's going to go anywhere, which is absolutely true.
Mm-hmm.
Being 1x4s with regular wall insulation, they're actually 3.5 inches thick, and there's no air gap built in. Is that a big problem? Will they still perform well? Should he double up 2 of them in some places to make 7-inch thick base straps? Oh my God, dude, how much wall space do you have? If you really want to set them off from the wall, you just put a spacer behind them.
That's right.
You know what I mean? Just take a little piece of wood that's like 1 inch or 2 thick and screw it in and call it good.
Or you could use a L bracket. You could put an L bracket on the wall and then hang it on there and just leave the L bracket is a little bit deeper than the 3.5 inches of the frame there. So there are multiple ways that you could build in a small air gap to it if you wanted to. But if you just take a 3.5 inch thick absorption panel and you put that up on your wall, that is going to go down a little bit deeper than your 2-inch panels. The 3.5 inch thick insulation is exactly what GIC uses in their 242 panels, but they add about a 1-inch air gap into their frame. So you can mimic that very easily just by the way that you mount it on the wall. If you don't, then you're going to basically cover the vocal range very nicely, including down into bassier male voices. You're going to be able to do that just with the 3.5 inches. So in terms of getting your sidewall reflections, that's really all you need to do. I wouldn't even worry too much about adding an air gap to that. Just the basic thickness that you have there is going to be really good for the entire vocal range. If you want to turn these into bass traps, you could just straddle some corners with it, and that would be enough on its own. You don't have to do a tremendous more with that, unless you're worried about getting right down to slightly under 80 hertz. But you could be quite effective just taking what you have and straddling a corner with it. I don't really think it's necessary to go and double up your insulation and, sort of almost like waste the frames that you've created just on doubling them up like that. If anything, I would maybe straddle a corner with one of these and maybe you tuck a little bit more insulation in behind it if you're just worried about not having quite enough. But it isn't really necessary. So that's what I would do with the panels you made.
Yeah, and I would just hang them on the wall and stop worrying about it. If it were me, I'd be honest with you. Like, it is so nuts how little people normally do to their home theaters that, and you by making these panels and putting them almost anywhere in your home theater.
Oh, you've cut down the reverberation in the most critical mid-range that you notice by far the most.
That is, it's going to make a pretty big difference. Now, it's weird, okay? It's weird because I'm going to say it's going to make a pretty big difference. You're going to go in there and you're going to be like, oh, no, it doesn't really make a difference. If we could take it all out at once, really quickly, and then you played something and you put it back in really quickly, the difference would be very dramatic.
Or even just clapped your hands or spoke really loudly.
Yeah. So, yes, everything Rob said about putting in the cross corners and all that other nonsense and putting air gaps in and stuff, you could do all that stuff and it will be better than, but literally just putting them anywhere will make a big difference. So I would only worry about it as much as you're willing to worry about it. Like if it's going to make you not hang them up because
I'd be more concerned if it was like I used 1-inch insulation.
Yeah.
Should I be doing something? I'd be like, yeah, you want to do something then. But no, 3.5, you're covering the entire vocal range just as it is, and that's the key part.
Karl, due to the ordinances and city building codes that they have to follow, Karl and E's Vanta Black Theater above their detached garage is going to have to be smaller than they wanted and originally planned. I think we've already heard this part of the story, right?
Yeah, but I'm just to remind who we're dealing with and have a little preamble. That wasn't that bad, Tom. That was one sentence. Come on, man.
I know. But
we might have new listeners who have no idea who we're talking about.
Poor Karl. Karl and his Vanta Black Theater, though he's worried about having a gray screen in.
That's right.
That means going for 4 fairly large subwoofers is now totally out of the question and unnecessary, as we have said multiple times. So he's looking for the right solution. One option would be to get 4 much smaller subs, basically as small as possible, but he still wants full 20 hertz extension and pressurization. Literally anything from SVS. Pick the size.
Well, there's
all of them
one
go down to
model
20.
Say maybe not.
Yeah. If you're talking about extension, the pressurization is a different thing. This is supposed to be a no compromise listening experience for every seat, after all. It doesn't seem as though SVS's 3000 micro subs quite reach all the way down to 20, but their SB1000 Pro models is barely any bigger. Could 4 of those work in the room now being a compact 11 by 18 feet? 11 by 18 feet. I mean, that's getting...
Yeah, I mean, we're under 2,000 cubic feet for sure. We're just maybe north of 1,500 cubic feet. Yeah. So, the answer is SB1000 Pros can, by the specs, if you have any doubts whatsoever in your mind, because this is Karl and money is not a problem, then SB2000 Pros would absolutely crush this room.
They're not that much bigger than the 1000 Pros.
They are not that much bigger. Yeah. But if every inch counts, then by the specs, SB1000 Pros can get you there. You'd actually be tamping down their output at 50 hertz to keep it completely linear. But it can. Yeah, the 3000 micros be a little bit of a challenge. They're sort of putting about 93, 94 decibels out there at max output at 20 hertz. Right. So even with 4 of them, to get to, you wouldn't be getting 115. You wouldn't be hitting, full reference volume with those. The SB1000 Pros would be cutting it awfully close. But SB2000 Pros certainly could. So just in those terms, if you want to feel super comfortable about it, maybe you go SB2000 Pros.
It says Paradigm has a tiny little 10-inch sub, and their specs say it reaches down to 70 hertz. Is it magic?
Nope, it's just lies? A different way of... Well, it's not lies. It's just a different way of rating extension.
Is it the DIN, right?
It's the DIN. Yeah. And so that quoted figure is basically its minus 12 decibel point. So what you want to do is double that number to 34 hertz, which is just about right for that seismic 10-inch subwoofer that they have. About 34 hertz extension is about right. There's no lies in there, but they're using a different metric for how they're stating the number. That's all.
I mean... It might not be lies, but they're not giving you an apples to apples spec.
It's still moving at 17 hertz.
I'm moving at 17 hertz. You don't call me a subwoofer.
Maybe we should.
I'm more of a subwoofer than that Paradigm is.
But 34 hertz for most music is going to be quite satisfying. So
I was supposed to look up an article and never did it. I don't remember which article it was. All right. Even with the subs being as physically small as possible, it doesn't really match their vision for an extremely clean aesthetic and absolutely nothing reflecting any light at all in the room. Therefore, in-wall or in-ceiling subs are really what they're hoping for. But before we get into the in-wall subwoofer models, would it be possible to build SVS's sealed subs into the walls or ceiling?
I mean, people have done it.
I mean, it's not impossible. It's not optimal. I mean, if you're really super worried about it, I would okay, so you're going to have panels in here, right? You're going to have acoustic treatments in here. So,
but I mean, it might all be fabric wall type of system.
Well, that's what I'm saying.
Yeah.
Instead of having square corners, you now have angled corners, and an angle is cut across enough that you could put the sub behind it.
Sure.
And that's how I would
also
deal
say
with this.
that, like, if you're going SB 2000 Pros, SB 1000 Pros for sure, they aren't so crazy that building a like if this is about floor space, if this is about walking into it, because I mean just to get around some of the corners of their room, they might be like, we don't want any sort of thing that our feet might knock into. You could put these on shelves in the top corners of your room. There's really no reason that you couldn't build in, say, SB 2000 Pros, one in each corner, on a shelf in the corner of each room, up high and out of the way. So that would be another way to do it too. With he didn't want us to share any diagrams of the new plans, but with that, I don't really see you doing it as in wall, because you just don't have the depth of the walls. Like, even for the SB 1000 Pros, that's deeper than a wall. So you don't really have that option. You could go ceiling if you have the attic space. The issue, of course, with building in any subwoofers is you have no flexibility in terms of positioning or movement. But we're almost certainly just going for the four corners of the room here, so I'm not super worried about that. So I would only see it as a possibility for ceiling in your case. There just is no way to build it into most of the walls that are existing here. They just don't have the depth. But you could go ceiling. People have done it. But I don't know. I mean, it's a bit of an engineering thing. He's going to have people building this room. It's not undoable. I'm a little bit concerned about, just opening up holes that size.
And build acoustic treatments on top of them and cover the whole thing.
Yeah,
the thing that I don't understand about what this I don't think we're being reasonable here, okay? Because he's not painting a Vanta Black theater and then covering the walls with fabric. That's not what he's doing, because that's ridiculous. Why would you paint it Vanta Black?
Just some little sections where the in-wall speakers are going to be, because you can't. Even the quote-unquote acoustically transparent drywall isn't entire frequency range acoustically transparent. So,
So I would be, I would think of the corners as being someplace you're going to build chunk traps or something along those lines, and then just make it so that the subwoofer can live underneath them and cover the entire front of it with some fabric, or above it, but cover the entire thing with fabric from floor to ceiling so that it's hidden, and then that's your solution for getting it out of sight, I guess.
But yeah, I'm more in favor of going with the small cube-shaped sealed subs from SVS and putting them in the top corners of your room if this is about not having anything your feet might knock into.
If you hide it behind something, then you can put it wherever you want there.
Faux column.
So now in-wall subs, he says, are there some that go right down to 20 hertz? SVS is saying their forthcoming 3000 series in-wall sub is basically going to perform just like the 3000 micros, so it doesn't quite have full 20 hertz extension, at least not in his room. What about Focal? Since all of their other speakers are all going to be Focal in-wall speakers. He spoke with an acoustician, and Karl specifically asked about the JL Audio in-wall subs. This particular acoustician wasn't a huge fan of them, but then again, he wasn't a fan of any in-wall subs. Welcome to the club.
Yeah, and again, I mean, the biggest problem is once they're in there, you can't move them, and most people aren't getting 4. So I can certainly be on board with that. I will just say, if you're going to do in-wall subs and money is not the issue, JL Audio is the only place I would look. Just going by the measurements, going by the performance, the extension that they have. Now, even they will say in an anechoic setting, their 113, that's a 13-inch driver in a sealed enclosure that goes inside the wall. They're like, anechoically, its response is 25 hertz. But you need to keep in mind with JL Audio that that's across the entire working frequency range. They're like minus 3 dB at 25 hertz because they can get crazy, crazy loud at 50 and 60 hertz. So they still have very significant 20 hertz output from those 113 in-wall Fathom subwoofers that JL Audio sells. And in your tiny room, you're going to have so much headroom at 50 and 60 hertz that you're going to be tamping that down a lot with your EQ, but you'd still be able to get full pressurization down at 20 hertz with those. So don't be thrown off by the minus 3 dB figures still being 25 hertz. You have to keep in mind the prodigious output capability up at 50 and 60 hertz that's going along with that. So I wouldn't have any problem on a performance level pointing it to JL Audio's Fathom 113 in-wall subwoofer. I personally wouldn't really look at anything else. As much as I love Focal, they really aren't a great subwoofer company. The subs they sell are massively overpriced, like a lot of speaker companies' subwoofers are. So that's what I would do. But if it comes down to it. Mm-hmm.
He received samples of the acoustically transparent screen materials they are considering. Center Stage XD and UF from Seymour AV, Enlightener Bright, and Neo from Seymour Screen Excellence, and Stewart Film Screen MicroPerf X Squared THX Ultra version of their Studio Tech 130 G4 material. And here is some pictures of some white materials.
Yes.
Very exciting.
That's right.
Which one's the Neo?
The one on top.
Which one's the Neo and then the UF?
They are labeled in the little picture.
Yeah, I know. I'm trying to see what they are. Okay.
Yeah.
Of the Seymour options, they would definitely choose the Enlightener Neo, but they are still leaning towards Stewart because they've always been. Why do you keep asking us this question? Because they've always been Stewart film screen fans, and they've also seen that particular screen material full size in action and couldn't notice the tiny holes from about 8 feet away. That said, Seymour's Enlightener Neo does appear to come the closest to having no texture at all, and the MicroPerf certainly does have significantly larger holes. They're right there. I don't know what that means. But
you can see them in the picture. There they are. You can see the holes.
But never having seen the Seymour screen full size in action, is that simply going to be a necessity in order to make a final decision? Just get the Stewart, please. Please. Seeing the Stewart sample up close, he was amazed he couldn't see any holes when it was in use. So now he's feeling like the small samples actually add to the confusion rather than making the decision easier. I have made the decision very easy for you. Get the one you want. Because don't stop. If you're worried about performance, you can clearly see on here what is the best performance, right? You can see that some have a less texture, less visible holes up close. This is ridiculously close that you will never be to your screen when you are viewing.
I mean, they're in a smaller room now. They're going to be sitting closer than they had originally intended.
Just get. If it were me, I'd be getting that Neo one
I'd be getting the Seymour. That's the same answer we've given since the very beginning.
We've been saying get Seymour AV, and you're like, well, but I really like Stewart screen. Then get the Stewart screen. But what about the Seymour? The Seymour's better. You should get it. But I really like Stewart. Why are you talking to us?
I mean, he saw it full size. Like, I couldn't see the holes, but now I have the sample and I can see the holes.
Oh my God, there's holes.
Yeah.
There's holes in the acoustically transparent screen. Will someone call the president? This is an outrage.
The one that's called perforated is perforated. So that's what happened. But
it is a war crime what's happening with these screens.
Both great choices. I've been saying Seymour Neo the entire time. Or I was saying Ultra Fine because I was thinking Seymour AV first because they were less expensive. But they want the screen that can be recessed into the ceiling when it rolls down. And only Seymour Screen Excellence provides that. So the equivalent of the Ultra Fine is the Enlightener Neo in the Seymour Screen Excellence lineup. That is 100% the way that I would go. As you can see, you cannot see any holes in that no matter how close you get. It is essentially a textureless screen. It's as good as it gets as far as
we're never going to convince you That's all there is to it. When everybody else who's listening to this podcast, all the times I've said to you people, oh, your brain tricks you, your brain plays all this, your brain has so much of an effect on your decision making and whether or not you think something sounds better than something or looks better than something. This is it. This is the perfect look at the images go to avrant.com, go click on the show notes, hit the Flickr album, go down until you see the images, and you tell me if there's any logical reason why we would still be having a conversation not involving price about these screen materials. Sure. And I can tell you without a doubt it is 100% psychology.
I mean, I'll just throw this in here. We know he's getting one of those JVC projectors that can do 8K E-shift. You're going to be throwing 8K pixels on this thing, man. 8K pixels, not 4K pixels. Do you want any tiny holes where the pixels are going to fall through?
They're going to fall through. They're just going to be gone. You're throwing them into the abyss. And this is all said with love. All right, this is all said with love.
We've been talking to Karl for a long, long time. We're having some fun.
And he knows. I've already said, just get the one you want. I've already said it because that's what he's going to do in the end. And he just wants us to validate it, but we're not gonna. Because there's clearly one that's better than the one that you want. Right. I mean, it's not even a little bit. It's not like, oh, it's just a tiny bit. It's like clearly. Now, from your distance, are you going to notice a difference between these two things? Probably not.
Yeah.
And that's why I say get the one you want, because it'll make you in particular happier. But you're not the only one listening to this podcast. There's other people who are like, well, I don't know which one I should get. Maybe I should get that Stuart. Go look at the image. You will not. It is not a subtle difference between these two materials.
And yes, when things are lit up, you got an image on the screen.
Yeah.
Your eye isn't looking for the tiny little holes. It's responding to the light that's reflecting back. So the chances of you seeing the holes is really, really small. But we're not talking about seeing the holes. We're talking, you put up a, full screen white. Is there a little texture to it? Not holes, a little texture to it. You look at that in lighter neo fabric and you're like, I'm not going to see any texture on that because there's no texture to begin with.
Yeah.
It's just a white screen. So there you go. Get that one.
Joe asked us last time about his Epson LS10500 laser projector that won't seem to allow him to change any of its 4K or HDR picture settings, and always seems to have its input signal locked to component. He checked the settings that Rob suggested and made sure it was all set to auto, since the Epson manual stated that doing a reset all wouldn't actually affect the input signal setting for some reason. There we go. Scrolling past the same pictures we saw last time.
They're set to auto.
Sadly,
he's shown
no dice.
The photographs. Yeah.
Yes, he's changed it. Still says component input. I don't know why.
He actually said it was always that way. He always said auto.
No. So he says that didn't change anything. So any other suggestions to try? Have you tried getting a Stuart film screen?
That's
probably the problem. Have you considered? Talk to Kurt. He'll tell you how good they are.
Karl.
Whatever.
So sadly, I do not have any other suggestions. I don't know what this could be. This is now time to call Epson customer service. The only thing I can do is be pedantic. I'm not saying that I think this is what has happened here, but just to cover all bases, are we 100% certain that all the settings from your source device are correct and that you really are sending a 4K HDR signal at the time that I'm grasping at straws for any reason that this could potentially happen. And the only thing I can come to now, outside of there's a glitch in your projector and it's time to call Epson, the only other thing I could grasp at is something in the source isn't actually sending 4K HDR even though you think it is, and let's just double check and make absolutely sure, because of course you won't get the 4K and HDR settings unless you are inputting a 4K and HDR signal. So just putting it out there to be 100% complete, but I think it's time to call Epson.
And he's got a comment here. I noticed the wrinkle in the bottom right-hand corner of the projection screen. Did I? Yes, I did.
You did.
And he is well aware. It bothers him too, but not quite as much as the hassle of taking the screen down, dismantling it, and reattaching the whole screen. My dude, I feel you. Okay.
Yeah.
So I am in my home theater right now. So if you're looking at the YouTube video, this is the back of my home theater behind me. And then in front of me is my screen. And as I look at my screen, I realize, having dogs in here who shake their heads from time to time, not the best idea in the world.
Sure.
In actual use, do I ever see anything on that screen? The answer is no. But right now I'm looking over, there's like one little spot over there that I should clean. And it's driving me nuts. But as soon as I turn the lights off, I'm going to be like, whatever, I don't care anymore.
Yeah.
So I feel you, man. I no hate, Joe. I'm not saying that you're a bad person. I'm going to point out the wrinkle. Who's not?
I think it's just because we're looking at the photo that he sent, and everything else is so pristine and clean.
It is so pristine.
And he's put the
even
effort
your vacuuming lines are
the
nice.
vacuum lines on the carpet. Everything else has been clearly dusted and is wonderful and lined up. Everything is
one little part.
OCD edges on everything. All the components have exactly the same amount of space on either side of them, and we're like. And then there's a wrinkle in the screen. How the heck did that happen? So I think it's the contrast. If you had a room that looked anything like my apartment always looks at, I wouldn't even notice the wrinkle because there'd be a ton of other things to look at and go, well, that ought to be cleaned and moved.
I had to clean off this corner of the couch over here before I started. It was full of blankets. Like, I live in Florida, right? It's a bajillion degrees all the time, pretty much. We're running the AC right now. The AC is on right now. And would it be November? Right?
Yeah.
Almost December. AC is currently running. And every time we come in here with my projector running and putting off heat and everything else, everybody in the house but me has got a blanket on. I'm like, you people are all weird.
Yeah, it was funny. I was thinking this morning when we were like, what time are we going to end up recording this episode today? And I was like, I'm getting ready for the first big snowfall is supposed to come like today and tomorrow as we're recording this. I'm like, maybe Tom won't be biking for as long this morning. I'm like, oh, wait, Florida. Yeah, they're not preparing for their first snowfall,
64 degrees this morning when I left the house to go cycle. Still wearing summer clothes, all right? There were some people out there in jackets. I'm like, what is wrong with you? And they're like sweats just rolling down their face like, I don't know what I was thinking. I'm like, I know. Like, well, yes. It's winter. I'm like, not here. That's not why you moved here, nerd. All right. Next question, Kris. Kris wants to get a new computer monitor for his mother. She primarily needs it for editing photos, but doesn't want anything too expensive. I hate it when people say that. Like, I just, and this is the thing. Tell me what you want, and I'll tell you how much it costs to get it. Right.
Oh, sure.
And then, you know what I mean? It's
like,
well,
it's just, if you go and look
nobody wants something too, like, who out there is like, but I just want the most expensive thing. Like, if there's something that's a little bit more expensive, I'll take that one. There are those people
Apple
out there.
Fans.
Yeah. Oh my God, we're gonna get so much hate mail.
No, I guess.
Don't worry, Elon's making a new phone for you guys.
Yeah, you could go get Apple's monitor. It's crazy overpriced monitor. It is great for photo editing. It's just I don't think that's the one that she wants because it's ridiculously overpriced.
You do not have to specify on this podcast that you don't want something too expensive because we never recommend the most expensive thing unless you ask for, like, I need to project an HDR image onto a 210-inch screen. Okay, we got something expensive for you. What would we recommend at a reasonable price? We got it. Reasonable price.
Yeah, so I mean, specifics weren't given, so I've got a little bit of a choice here because I don't know what you consider reasonable and not too expensive. I'm thinking what happened is if you just Google search best professional photo editing computer monitor, they're like $1,400-$1,500 and up, and they're saying I believe from the wording of the question probably looking for something less expensive than that. So the one I'm going to point you to first. If you're getting it directly from Dell, I'm going to be pointing you at a couple of Dell monitors. They have a couple of very nice monitors for photo editing purposes. The number one model I would point you to is their U2723 QE. Now, the 27 in that is the size. There is a 32-inch size available if you want to go larger. But for the price range that we're talking about, the 27-inch version directly from Dell is $585. You can easily find it for $525 buying it from Amazon instead. But that's the price range for the U2723 QE. What you get with this is full coverage of DCI-P3 and Adobe RGB, and an exceedingly accurate sRGB color right out of the box. All the reviews are like, yeah, you don't even need to calibrate this thing unless it's like truly like really high-end professional, has to be 100% correct color. But sRGB is the typical standard working in the digital photos, but this does have the wide color gamut to get you out to Adobe RGB and DCI-P3 color if you need to do so. So very reasonably priced to be able to do that. This is an IPS panel. This is a standard backlight, so it doesn't have maximum contrast that you're getting from, like a double layer LCD or anything crazy like that. But when it comes to editing your photos and just having accurate colors, that's the main thing that we're worried about. So I think, just north of $500 is a very reasonable price for that level of performance. However, if that's still too expensive, you could step down to, still from Dell, the S2722QC. So memorable, but if you just sort of think one is the U series and one is the S series, it's a little bit easier to wrap your head around that. Again, there's a 32-inch version if you just need to go larger, which of course costs more than the 27-inch model I'm talking about, but that goes for just $280 directly from Dell and isn't really any cheaper anywhere else. So $280 for the S2722QC. Here, you are not getting the wide color. All right, you're stepping down to sRGB only and not quite as accurate straight out of the box. You might need to do a bit of a color calibration to get really accurate sRGB, but it'll do that, which is what most people are worried about editing digital photos, is having really accurate sRGB colors. So I can't imagine that you're going to look at $280 and go, well, that's way more expensive than we were thinking of for, a photo editing monitor. So one of those two from Dell is what I would point you to. Yeah, there you go.
Very exciting.
Tom is very excited.
I'm very excited. Infinite Gary. Rob said that he's thankful for QD-OLEDs on the Thanksgiving episode, ?
I know. I told you it would be a shock.
Oh, no
a surprise coming from me.
Is that because it doesn't have the fourth white subpixel as LG displays W-OLED panels? Gary has always objected to having the white subpixels, just sort of out of principle. Who could imagine a less important hill to die on, but whatever.
He must not have liked the sharp aquos.
I'm taking a stand against this white subpixel.
That's right. It's
not
not in
on
the
my
signal.
watch.
It shouldn't be there.
But if we're getting technical, why is it the true RGB subpixel structure of Samsung displays QD OLEDs better than the WRGB subpixel structure of LG's displays W-OLEDs? Oh my God. My brain is like, my eyes aren't even seeing this anymore. It's
right.
Like, I'm trying to read it.
Correctly, though.
I'm trying to read it, but it's like, I'm on autopilot because I'm like, I can't comprehend what I'm seeing because there's too many stupid letters. All right. Other than who cares? What's your answer, Rob? Because I don't.
Yeah,
care.
so I mean, it's what Samsung, of course, is marketing. This is the thing, because this is about the only thing they can point to that is, superior on a technical level, because they're still a little bit more expensive and they don't have the range of sizes yet that LG is offering. But what we're talking about here is color volume. All right, so if we're thinking about the range of different color, like just the shades of the colors, your reds, your greens, your blues, and all the combinations, your yellows and oranges and purples and all the rest of it. If we're talking about just that as a two-dimensional, like we often look at that CIE 1931 diagram that kind of looks like a horseshoe with blue in the bottom left and green at the top of the horseshoe curved shape and red in the bottom right, and that sort of encompasses all the colors that the human eye can see. Well, color volume is now making that three-dimensional. It's now adding a Z-axis to that, which is the luminance. It's how bright are each of those colors. So if we're taking a, really saturated red or blue or green or any of the secondary colors, if we're taking a really saturated version of that color and then also trying to make it really, really bright, lots and lots of nits, not lots and lots of lumens of that color, that's the color volume that we're talking about. Now, with just red, green, and blue subpixels in the quantum dot OLEDs, you're able to maintain that very deep color saturation over the entire luminance range of any of those given colors. So whether it's a very, very dim, very, very deep saturated red, or a really, really bright, deep saturated red, it's using the exact same subpixel to generate that the entire way through. On LG Display's W-OLED panels, they have this fourth white subpixel, which is there to just add luminance, but it is diluting the color when it does that, because you're adding nits, but it's not all coming from the saturated red or the saturated blue or the saturated green. You're now throwing in these extra white nits coming at your eye, and that dilutes the color volume. So if you looked at like a three-dimensional model of the LG OLED's color volume, it would be more like a cone. All right. So as that z-axis is going up, as the number of nits is going up, the whole thing is like curving inward all up to a point at the top, which would be like pure white at its brightest. But all the other colors are not quite as deep and as saturated anymore. As you're increasing the amount of light coming out of the display, you're diluting the color. So that's the thing that the RGB only subpixels of the quantum dot OLEDs are delivering. But when we say it's an RGB subpixel structure, it isn't as though it's red, green, and blue subpixels directly beside each other like we've been used to with LCD displays. They've had to arrange them into a little bit of a triangle, and that's because the quantum dots, by their nature, the red and green quantum dots that they're using, they light up whenever any photon hits them, all right? Any photon hits those quantum dots and they light up. And they had to arrange them in this little bit of a triangle rather than all side by side, so that any stray little photons from any of the other subpixels wouldn't have as easy of a time illuminating the quantum dots directly beside them. They tried to arrange them to create as much space between the subpixels as possible. And that means that colored text doesn't look quite as sharp. So if you're going to use the quantum dot OLEDs to read colored text on your display, it doesn't look quite as sharp as the LG OLED. So there's a give and take on everything that you do. But on a technical level, that's why you could claim the quantum dot OLEDs are slightly superior.
All right. I'm sorry. I'm listening to that. Jay says, so we always talk about field of view. We all talk about angles, like Rob's oft mentioned. I feel like I should be. 45-degree field of view. But how do you actually figure that out? Is there an easy formula, a handy link? So Rob's got one, I've got one, and I've got an article on AV Gadgets called "What is Field of View and Why is it Important?" And that will link to my viewing distance calculator that I use.
Sure. And
also other articles that talk about how you can figure it out in other ways. So go over there. But Rob, what's your seating distance one?
Yeah, well, just in general, I think it helps to be able to picture what it is that we're talking about, because we just do say field of view, and we say a 45-degree field of view. To me, the easiest way to picture it is, okay, you sit down and you look straight ahead, okay? And we're going to say that that is 0 degrees. 0 degrees straight in front of me from my eyes to whatever my eyes hit. It's going to be my screen. That's 0 degrees. Now, the left edge of the screen is going to be some distance over to the left, and the right edge of my screen is going to be some distance over to the right from that straight ahead, right down the middle, 0 degrees. So I'm going to have a plus and minus degree, right? Maybe it's 20 degrees to my left and 20 degrees to my right. That's where the edges of my screen end up. So that's my field of view. So that plus and minus 20 degrees, that's my 40-degree field of view, right? If I'm talking about my 45-degree field of view, I'm looking straight ahead, that's 0 degrees. I'd be plus and minus 22.5 degrees. You go 22.5 degrees over to my left, 22.5 degrees over to my right. That creates my 45-degree field of view. So if you're just calculating it, like you don't have a handy, thing that you can punch the numbers into and look at on your screen, you just don't have your phone with you, as long as you have a calculator, you can figure that out with trigonometry, all right? So if you just know the width of your screen, then what we're talking about is like taking half of that width, right? If you imagine, again, you're looking straight forward at the very middle of your screen, we're only talking about going to the left from the middle or going to the right from the middle. So we're talking about half the width of your screen. So you're taking half the width of your screen, and you're taking the distance from your eyes to the screen, and you're dividing that half the width of the screen by the distance from eyes to screen. That's your opposite over adjacent, right? We made a triangle there. That's your opposite over adjacent. So that's the tangent. So that'll give you the tangent of that angle. And so now you just use your calculator, take the inverse tangent of that number, and now you've got the angle. and then you're going to double that to get the entire field of view. So that's the way you would calculate it on a calculator. Divide half the width of the screen by the distance from eyes to screen, take the inverse tangent of that, and then multiply by 2. Or if you do have access to your phone, you go to a website. The one I like is over at tvfinder.com. That's Finder without an E, so it's Findr, but tvfinder.com. They have a size, screen size, and seating distance, and you can just punch in whatever screen size you want, and then you can use a little slider, and it tells you what the angle is going to be on that slider, and that'll let you figure out what your field of view is going to be. Or inversely, you could set what your angle is and then use the slider on the screen size slider to figure out what the distance is. So it just gives you a little readout at the bottom there, what your screen size need to be or what your distance needs to be for a given screen size to get the field of view that you want. So a very handy little calculator there.
Yeah, the slider sucks. The slider on the right's okay. The slider on the bottom, but doesn't it like bumps up by
it jumps
1,
to any
by 1.1 meter if you're doing the how far away you sit, and then the other one's not quite as bad because it goes by a single inch for the size of the TV, but that doesn't help you. So with mine, it is the hometheaterengineering.com/viewing distance calculator.html.
Sure.
Anyways, this one's just, it doesn't have the fancy graphics, but you put in your distance from the screen, the shape of the screen, which is either 4:3 because this thing is old,
that is old,
4:3 or 16:9. It should always be 16:9, and then you can either choose the diagonal size of the image, or the width of the image, and then you put that number in, and it'll tell you what your viewing angle is.
Sure.
And for me, that's, if you've got a wall that is a certain width, and you're like, I want a screen that's this width, so the fixed width, you can put this in here and then figure out what your distance, change the distance that you're going to sit from it until you get to either the viewing angle or the screen size. A little bit of trial and error in that one. Yeah, this one's doesn't have the fancy sliders that jump around too much. You can make this into decimals or whatever you want. So I like mine better. But that's just whatever. And it's got the SMPTE, and it tells you kind of what the SMPTE is, and then the THX recommended and other things. So I like it. And you can switch to metric units if you're weird. But that's all there. So
like the entire rest of the world outside the United States. Except for what's the other one country that's still using imperial units? There's one other out there keeping you company.
No one cares. No one cares about that country. If it's not America, it's not America. Dear. Doesn't count.
Come and get them, Twitter. It's all fair game on Twitter. There's no rules anymore.
It's the Wild West out there. Kevin, how long? I feel like we've been going for 5 hours.
No, we've got 25 minutes out. I don't think we're going to fill it up. That's fine. You had 2 doses of us last week, so if we're under 2 hours this week, I think we're all right.
Kevin says those Black Friday deals on OLED TVs were mighty tempting, but as good as those prices were, they are often open box listings that are even cheaper. Would it be a good idea to go with an open box for an OLED? Well, I guess it depends on the return policy. So I guess, I mean, that's what it comes down to for me. I love open box or refurb deals as long as the return policy and the warranties are still intact.
Yeah,
that's what I care about. I don't care that somebody opened it. I normally don't even care if there's a remote involved, but if things like microphones, especially on receivers, are missing, that can be problematic. But other than that, I'm all for it.
Yeah, to me the main thing is like if this is coming from some warehouse deal where return shipping is going to be a problem or whatever, I'm not super keen on it specifically for OLEDs because when it comes to OLEDs, I don't know if there's proper studies have been on this, but sort of like anecdotally, around 20% of OLEDs don't have perfect uniformity across their whole screen. People who are familiar with the manufacturing process, basically it's a high heat process where they end up laminating some of the layers of the screen. It kind of goes across these big drum rollers when they do that, and they typically do like 10 screens at a time and then reset and then bring in the materials to do another 10 screens. And it seems as though the first screen and the last screen, where the drum is like not perfectly uniform in heat for that first screen, it's still like warming up a tiny little bit, and then it's just starting to cool down a little bit on the very last screen that goes across the rollers through this process. It seems like those 2 screens out of the 10 are the ones that end up with this, like maybe you see a little bit of a band on slightly towards the left or right hand side of the screen, like when the screen is like just showing a uniform gray, like a dark uniform gray, you'll see like a pretty obvious vertical band on one side or the other, or just the general screen uniformity is a little bit off, and it seems to be about 20% of OLED screens out there have that little bit. Now, some people are just plain never going to notice that, and that's why they're perfectly willing to keep selling those, but it seems to be that quite a few of these open box ones are the return of those 20% models where they're like, you turn it on, you're looking at like the pure white screen, and you're like, how come it's a little bit gray on the left-hand side? Or how come it's like, I'm looking at a kind of a dark screen, like often it's the YouTube screen that first comes up, like the logo that shows up before it goes to the homepage. And they're like, how come the gray is like different shades of gray across the screen? And then they search a little and they're like, I got one of the 20%. Like the other 80% all look great and uniform and nearly perfect. But there's like 20% of them out there that are a little bit. So it's like, I think just prepare yourself, particularly with OLED screens, that, okay, it might be that I'm going to want to test it. If you're like buying it from a Best Buy store and you can just, it's a 55-inch or 65-inch, and you can put that in the back of your vehicle and take it back quite easily, and Best Buy has a really good return policy, or it's Costco or something, like an excellent return policy, I wouldn't have too many worries about it, but I would just mentally prepare myself for the possibility that, I'm going to turn it on, look at a pure gray screen, and see a vertical band. I'll be like, okay, that's why it was open box, and now it's going to be open box for somebody else, because I'm taking that one back. That'd be about all. Be prepared.
Michael's home theater setup is in a living room that is open to the kitchen and dining area on the left, and then open to the stairs going up on the right. He really only cares about one seat being really good, and so he's been happy using a single large HSU subwoofer this entire time. He added a bunch of room treatments and has run Odyssey many times, despite making quite a few placement changes along the way. It has always been quite consistent in setting the subwoofer's trim level, and he has never needed to adjust the volume knob on the subwoofer itself. His SPL meter has always agreed with results, and at most, it's maybe a 2 dB difference in the trim level that Odyssey has set for the subwoofer output throughout all the many times he's run the measurements. But now they've gone and rearranged the living room furniture and layout. None of the home theater equipment has changed, and the acoustic treatments are all still there. His primary seat, the only one he really cares about acoustically, has ended up 1 foot forward in the room from where it used to be.
Hey, Tom can see where this is going.
But now, with the new furniture layout, there's only one spot for the subwoofer to go. He reran Odyssey, and now it set the subwoofer trim level to -12, meaning the subwoofer is now super hot in that location for some reason.
As far as it thinks, as far as he thinks. Yeah.
So he tried lowering the volume knob on the subwoofer itself, but during the Odyssey setup stage, where it gets you to set your subwoofer's volume knob before running the full set of chirps, indicated the subwoofer's level was too low and wanted him to turn it back up to where it was before. He tried running Odyssey both ways, with the subwoofer's own volume knob turned down and with it set where it has always been, and in both cases, the subwoofer trim level still ended up getting set to -12. His SPL meter disagrees. If he goes by that, with the receiver's master volume set to 0, it says to put the subwoofer trim back to about -0.5 instead of -12. And if he just goes by his ears listening to regular content, the bass seems to sound best with the subwoofer's volume knob set to where it's always been, and the trim level more or less set to 0, just like his SPL meter indicates. But he's worried. What should he do if Odyssey is being thrown off this much as far as the trim levels is concerned? Is it maybe messing up the EQ as well?
Yeah.
Yeah, that's not a concern. It's well past the concern that this is evidence. Yeah. And since he really doesn't have any other placement options for the subwoofer anymore, is there even anything he can do about it? What should he do here? I'm going to link up an article about microphone placement because I want to make sure that your microphone is placed properly when you're doing these.
While you're looking that up, just to very quickly overview of that, the main thing is that when you're doing any of these automatic setup procedures, even if it's one that we don't really like very much, like Onkyo's Accu EQ or something like that, it's still important to have your microphone on a tripod. You do not put it in your seat. You do not put it on the top of your seat back. You put it on a tripod. You put it on a stand.
They now come with that cardboard tripod thing too.
The Odyssey one does, yeah. It has the little cardboard rocket ship that you can put the microphone on, but it needs to be on some sort of tripod or microphone stand that's holding it, and then you need to have 1 foot of just open air all the way around that microphone. Again, you don't put it on the tripod and then right back against your headrest because that's where your head is going to be, which, intuitively makes sense, but you don't want that close of a reflection to something. In fact, if you have removable seat backs on your recliners, take the seat back off. I know it seems unintuitive. You're like, that's not how I'm really going to use it. No, we're worried about the direct sound coming from the speakers to the microphone during the calibration process. Whatever happens with some high frequency reflections off your seat back, that's going to happen. We aren't going to be able to compensate for that from seat to seat. There's no way the EQ can do anything about that, but it can do something about the sound that made a straight line from the speaker to the microphone, and that's what we're worried about. So if you can take the seat back off, do it. If you have, just a light chair that you sit in, just take it out of there and just have a microphone on a tripod where your head is going to be, but you want to have that open bubble of air all the way around the microphone. Now, in Michael's case, I did respond back and ask about that, and he's like, yeah, no, I followed the microphone placement things. He was well aware of that. Uses a tripod, has the 1 bubble, 1 foot radius bubble of air around the microphone. So I don't think that was the issue in this case. And what he's describing is not exactly a shock. This happens sometimes. We're going to dig into that now. But yes, it is important to start with proper microphone placement for everybody else who might be listening to this, because very often we see someone just put the microphone on the top of their headrest. They're like, that's about where my head is going to be. And you can end up with some weird results if you do that.
That's right.
So what is this, Tom?
That's it.
Well, that isn't the only part of it. That's the microphone part of it. What the heck is going on here, and what is he going to do, Tom?
Oh, right. Okay, so you think I've only moved my seat a foot. And how could that possibly make that much of a difference? And the answer is, it absolutely can in a room that has got openings and we can't predict the bass.
Oh, sure. But it still has standing waves.
Yes.
And oh boy, howdy, did you apparently find one.
You found it. In case you're wondering where your standing wave was, it was at your feet when you were reclined. Okay?
Right.
Or at maybe your knees. I don't know. It was right there, though. It was right in front of your face the whole time. You just couldn't see it. So, yeah, a standing wave is when, as the bass bounces around the room, the waves start interacting with each other. Some waves will cancel out at certain frequencies, making the sound reduce in volume, and other waves will be additive and they will create a boost at certain frequencies. You have found the frequency where there's a big boost. Now,
at that particular location,
right?
Because when we're talking about a standing wave, it is all related to the dimensions of your room. So if you think about, just a nice smooth sine wave coming out, right? Up, down, very smooth and even. If that just happens to fit perfectly within the dimensions of, 2 opposing parallel walls, so that it bounces off one wall and it comes back and it perfectly doubles up on itself, right? You got the wave coming this way, you got the reflection coming back the other way, and they're both going up at exactly the same time. They'll only be doing that in certain locations in your room. You move 1 foot over, and now the wave that's going one way and the reflection that's coming back the other way are no longer both going up at exactly the same time. So when they meet at this new location 1 foot away, they're maybe slightly canceling out a little bit, or they're both going up, but not both going up at exactly the same amount at exactly the same time, like they are this 1 foot location forward in your case. You happen to get one, maybe it's harmonic, but like one particular frequency that right at that exact location, they are just perfectly doubling up, and you have this massive hump, but at one particular frequency, and maybe it's harmonic. And
maybe
this
it's
is
really
why,
low too. So it
could be.
Your SPL meter and everything else is giving you sort of and maybe your personal experience of sitting there. You're like, it sounds fine. Yeah. But you're gonna hit that frequency someday, and you're gonna be like, is my room falling apart? Like, is something terrible happening here? You'll hear vibrations and everything else, and you may feel it. There may be that. There could be all kinds of stuff that would happen. So the fact that it's not this is a sweep issue, right? Like, go back, sit in your chair, play some sweeps, and then try to hear what your speakers are doing, because you may get to a certain frequency and you're like, oh my, that got loud.
That was the one.
That was the one. You found it. And the fact that you're playing normal content and not noticing it is totally that's totally normal.
So this sort of mysterious thing of, okay, Odyssey does this pre-measurement thing where it just plays some pink noise out of the subwoofers, gives you a little readout on screen, and says, okay, adjust the volume knob on the back of the subwoofer until the readout on screen is in the green zone. And when I did that, I had to put the volume knob of my subwoofer back where it's always been this whole time. It's the same sub in the same room, but the placement of where I'm sitting and therefore where microphone position number 1 is, that's changed by a foot, and maybe where my subwoofer is located in the room now that I only have one place I can physically put it because of the way the room is decorated and arranged now, maybe that's changed, but it's the same sub in the same room and the same room treatments. So the volume knob, unsurprisingly, according to that, pre-measurement part, ended up at the same place, but then I run the full set of measurements and it sets the trim level at -12. And even if I turn the volume knob down, it still sets it at -12, meaning like it would have set it even lower if it could have, but -12 is as low as the trim level goes. How can they be that diametrically opposed? Well, it's because the pink noise is all of the frequencies playing at once. And when that's happening, and you're getting all the frequencies playing at once, the SPL meter is reading that, or the microphone is reading that, and going, okay, the average, because that's what it's looking at, the average across here means that your volume knob needs to be set where it was always set. And your SPL meter says that that's where it should go, and everything sounds fine. You're playing regular content, and it all sounds fine with the volume knob set there. But when it does the actual measurements and it's playing a sweep, it's a very short sweep, so it sounds like a chirp, but it's a sweep. It hits this one frequency that's, doubling up on itself like crazy and saying, oh, okay, wait a second here. To try and bring that one really problematic frequency when I'm not looking at an average anymore, and now I'm actually measuring frequency by frequency because it was a chirp, excuse me, or a sweep, well, now I have to bring the volume of everything down just to try and fit it within my parameters. And even setting the subwoofer's trim level to -12 wasn't enough to get me there. So your concern that this now might have negatively impacted the equalization that Odyssey applied, that's well-founded. Because unfortunately, it's going to say, okay, I need to equalize that one super problematic frequency down. I need to cut that down because the trim level alone wasn't able to do it. But now I've lowered the trim level so much, I need to raise all the other frequencies to bring them back to where they were supposed to be. The end result, like you say, just listening to it, probably isn't going to be tremendously problematic. But if you do measure it, if you bust out Room EQ Wizard and your own measurement microphone and you measure it, you might find some strange results coming out of there because what the equalization has now tried to do to try to compensate for that. So now the really big question, what can you do about this? Because normally our thing is, okay, you got one sub, you really only care about one seat. That's okay. We could do a subwoofer crawl. We could do trial and error measurement. And we're going to try and find the location in the room where you could put the subwoofer where you don't get any, absolutely massive drop out from cancellation or any absolutely massive peak, something that can be equalized at that seat relatively easily. But that means you have to be able to move either the seat or the subwoofer.
Yeah, and
there's no way around it.
Right?
He's saying he can't really do that. Now,
it's a foot, dude.
Really,
okay.
Well, that's just it. Is that really, really true? Because can the subwoofer move 6 inches? Can the seat move 6 inches?
Right.
If you're able to move both of those things 6 inches, well, now you've cumulatively created a foot difference, and you might be able to remove this problem that way. But what we would want you to do is play a sweep, right? Not pink noise. Play a sweep and have that sweep playing on repeat and do those adjustments prior to running Odyssey, because as long as Odyssey ends up detecting this massive double up peak that's happening at one particular frequency, you're going to run into this. Yeah, it's trying to overcompensate in its equalization to bring that one down and all the other ones up and moving the trim level where it shouldn't be. And it is a bit problematic. You kind of got to find a way to get rid of that one crazy peak
and
that
if
is
you've
happening
got
at one frequency.
a built-in EQ in your subwoofer, which we rarely talk about using because I honestly don't see that there's much use for them in subwoofers. They're not very granular. You don't have a ton of control, and you need to have equipment and everything else. But in your case,
this is almost like exactly what it's for.
This is exactly what it's for. You're going to, like, even if you find like a YouTube video that has like the frequencies as it's going up, and you can find, generally speaking, the one or the area where it's in.
And you can do that with Room EQ Wizard too. It has a generator that just goes, and you can see exactly what frequency it was as it's slowly playing that sweep. Yeah, but that requires, again, we're with microphones and everything else. I'm talking about doing it by ear. I mean, at this point, this should be so. I mean, with a difference of minus 12, which is really minus 6, but minus 12 on here. No, I'm sorry, it is minus 12 because you're saying that it should be around 0. It should be very obvious where your height, where your boost is, and just tamping that down a little bit. And by a little bit, I mean a whole lot. You you could bring this all back in line. Now, bass is going to sound weird everywhere else in here, but you don't care about that, right? You just care about. And also, like, if it's one frequency that's being cut way down for all the other seats, they're not going to notice that it's missing when it plays. Like, it's really hard to know that one bass frequency is missing. And I mean, like you say, normally you're listening to most content. Most content isn't playing this one frequency, whatever it happens to be. That's why we keep saying a sweep in order to identify where this is happening. But it is important, like, there's no real way around this other than, you got to identify what that super problematic frequency is and cut it down somehow before running Odyssey. Now, could this be as simple as, well, I've left this 1 foot bubble of aero on my microphone. Can I move that like, my seat is actually going to stay where it is? Because again, that microphone is one point in space. Your 2 ears aren't even there necessarily, right? Maybe you're able to move the microphone not so much forward or back. Maybe it needs to stay where it is there for whatever reason, but you could move it left or right a little bit. Like, there's things we're saying we can do that are, like, again, all within 6 inches of each other, right? The seat moves 6 inches, the sub moves 6 inches, the microphone moves 6 inches. Like, there are potentially ways that you can do this without actually moving anything significantly that will at least get Odyssey to not be right where that huge peak is happening. And now it can do all the other things that it does without trying to correct for this one very specific problem. And it's important to have that sort of settled before running the whole Odyssey process. Otherwise, you do end up with it doing weird compensations that we don't want it to do. So I think that's about it. If you, because I don't think a lot of the HSU subwoofers do have like its own parametric EQ built into it. You could add, just like a mini DSP to take care of that, which is, a bit of a, it's $100 adding on to there, whatever it is, but that would be a way that you could do this.
It's weird. I wonder how much those things can move when the option is spend a lot of time, effort, and $100 plus a measurement microphone, which is also going to cost $100.
I mean, particularly, like, maybe the seat moves 6 inches even more forward, and that field of view got even a little bit bigger.
Yeah. That I wonder if we're going to find out that these immutable seats in subwoofer locations are actually, in fact, quite mutable when
or in fact just the microphone, where, like, you know what, even though I moved it 6 inches farther forward during the measurement and it set my distances to my front, left, and right speakers as it'd be a hypotenuse, right? So it would be even a little bit less than that if you move the microphone forward. So now it says that it's 5 inches closer to me than it really is. Turns out I don't notice the what would that be? 0.032 millisecond difference.
Not doing
my
that math
brain
in
just
my
doesn't
head, Rob.
catch that in. Yeah. So there you go. That might be a solution right there.
All right. We want to thank our listeners of the week. We want to thank Stephen Gurinder for going to avrant.com and clicking on the Buy Us a Cup of Coffee link, as well as our 139 patrons over at patreon.com.
Yes, indeed. Gurinder, Steve, thank you for the PayPal donations, and patreon.com/AVRant podcast is the place to go to sign up to make an automatic monthly donation if you'd like to do that. So a big thanks to our 139 patrons over there. Thank you all for the financial support.
I want to thank Greg for talking to Rob about maybe donating his Harmony Ultimate Plus Hub.
It seems very promising. Yes. I'm happy about that. Thank you, Greg.
And we got some notes of gratitude, so we're going to thank you for thanking us from Greg, Gurinder, Kris, Greg from Australia, Jack, Aras, and BJ.
Yes, indeed. That's Greg, Gurinder, Kris, Greg S., Jack, Aras, and BJ. Thank you all very much for the notes of gratitude to us for keeping the podcast going through the times, through everything that's happening these days. And we've managed somehow. We're back with video. It's all amazing. Hooray, hooray. So thank you to everybody who continues to listen and send in your questions.
To get your question answered, all you have to do is ask. You ask by emailing us at question@avrant.com. For AVRant, I'm Tom Andrew.
And I'm Rob H. Now stay in and listen to something.
Want your question answered? Send it to question@avrant.com. This is AVRant.
Now go out and listen to something.